Hello everyone. Before we start, hit that like button and subscribe. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. That's how YouTube keeps sending you stories like this. And now, let's get into it. I was in Seattle for a short work trip in late November, staying downtown near the financial district. The company booked me at the Executive Pacific Hotel, one of those older, historic places that still tried to compete with the newer chains by calling itself boutique. The outside looked nice enough. Brick facade, narrow windows, a faded green awning above the entrance. Inside, it smelled faintly of old carpet and lemon cleaner, like most hotels that have been standing for almost a century. The lobby was small. Just a couple of chairs, a front desk, and an elevator with brass doors that creaked every time they opened. I checked in around 9 p.m. after a long day. It had been raining all evening, that thin Pacific Northwest drizzle that never really stops. My jacket was damp. My shoes left marks on the tile, and I remember how quiet the lobby felt. The young guy at the desk handed me my key card, smiled automatically, and told me my room was on the 8th floor. When I stepped into the elevator, I noticed 2 cleaning carts parked against the wall opposite the front desk, half filled with towels and vacuum cords. A woman wearing a gray uniform was finishing up mopping near the vending machines. It looked like they were wrapping up for the night. The elevator was slow, the kind that stops for a second before leveling properly with the floor. When the doors opened, the hallway was long and narrow with low ceilings and dim yellow lighting. It smelled faintly of detergent and warm dust. Every few doors, a cart was parked, stacked with folded sheets and bottles of cleaner. Someone had been working the whole floor, but I didn't see anyone. The carpet was that old hotel style, floral, worn down in the center from years of foot traffic. My room was at the far end, 821. Inside, it was plain but fine. Small desk, single bed, the kind of window that only opens a few inches. I turned on the heat and changed into a t-shirt. I remember thinking the hum of the ventilation was kind of relaxing. I scrolled through my phone for a while, watched a bit of local news, and finally went to sleep sometime after midnight. At around 3 a.m., I woke up to the sound of a vacuum running. It wasn't faint or distant. It was right outside my door. The noise came in steady, rhythmic bursts. That droning hum that rises and dips as someone moves back and forth over carpet. At first I thought maybe someone from housekeeping had gotten stuck doing a late shift. I tried to ignore it, pulled the pillow over my head, but the sound didn't stop. It moved up and down the hallway, pausing for a few seconds, then starting again. It went on like that for what felt like 20 minutes. The weird thing was how steady it was. No voices, no footsteps, just that sound. Eventually I got up, still half asleep, and walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. Not a single cart, no movement, no lights on. The noise had stopped. I stood there for a minute, just staring. The air outside my door looked still, like nothing had ever been happening. I opened the door just to check, even though I wasn't sure why. The hallway lights were dim. That kind of soft orange tone that makes everything look a little older. The carpet stretched empty in both directions. No cords, no vacuums, no carts. The only sound was the low hum of the elevator at the far end. I went back in and sat on the edge of the bed. I told myself it was probably coming from another floor. Sound can carry strangely in older buildings. I stayed awake for a while, scrolling through my phone again, before finally falling back asleep around 4:30. In the morning, I went downstairs for coffee before heading out to meetings. There was a different person at the front desk, a woman in her 50s with short hair and glasses. When I mentioned that I'd heard vacuuming around 3 in the morning, she looked confused. Then she said they don't clean overnight, not for years. They only do floors in the afternoon, once guests are checked out. That stuck in my head all day. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe someone was finishing a late shift, or maybe a maintenance worker was using a shop vac for something. Still, the way the sound had been so close to my door, right in that hallway, didn't fit. Later that afternoon, I came back to the hotel between meetings to drop off my laptop. The cleaning staff were out again, working through the floors. A woman pushing a cart saw me waiting near the elevator and asked which room I was in, maybe just making small talk. When I told her 821, she paused for a second. Her face didn't change much, but her tone shifted a little when she said, "Oh, you heard her too." I asked who, but she only said, "The old lady who cleaned this floor. She still comes around sometimes." She said it calmly, like it was just a fact, and then went back to folding towels. The rest of the trip passed normally, but I couldn't shake that conversation. Every night when I walked back to my room, I noticed how the air felt a little heavier near that end of the hall. I started paying attention to small things, faint scuff marks in the carpet near the wall, the way one of the overhead lights flickered sometimes, the smell of vacuum dust that lingered faintly, even though no one was cleaning at that hour. On my last night, I came back late from dinner, around 10. The hallway was quiet, all the carts gone. I sat on the bed, packed most of my things, and left only my clothes for the next morning out on the chair. I turned off the lamp and lay back, but I didn't fall asleep right away. I kept thinking about that vacuum sound, the rhythm of it, how it had felt like someone was working their way slowly up the hall toward my room. At some point, I must have drifted off, because the next thing I remember was waking again in the dark. The clock showed 3:06 a.m. No sound this time, no vacuum, just the low hum of the heating vent. I lay there for a while listening. Then I noticed something faint. Not a sound, more like a vibration. The air in the room seemed to carry a subtle tremor, as if something mechanical was running far off. It wasn't loud enough to identify, but it reminded me of that same deep hum from before. It came and went, irregular, like a memory of noise still echoing through the building's old wiring. I didn't get up. I just stayed still, staring at the ceiling, counting the seconds between each soft pulse of sound. Eventually, it stopped completely. When I checked out the next morning, I asked again, more out of curiosity than concern. The same front desk clerk from the previous day looked up the cleaning schedule for my floor. Nothing had been logged between 7 p.m. and 8 a.m. No one had even requested service. Outside, it was gray and wet again, the kind of morning Seattle does best. I loaded my bag into the rental car and sat there for a minute before starting the engine. I watched the rain streak across the windshield and thought about how thin the walls in that old building were. How easy it would be for old sounds to get trapped somewhere, in the vents, the wiring, the hollow spaces between floors. Maybe that was all it was. Maybe the hotel had layers of noise built up over decades of use, echoing faintly through the night whenever the air systems kicked on. But as I drove away, I realized something that hadn't occurred to me before. Every time I'd walked down that hallway, there had been a faint track of flattened carpet along the wall, the kind left by a vacuum's edge running the same path over and over. It was only visible when the light hit it from the side. That morning when I rolled my suitcase to the elevator, the marks were still there, perfectly straight, ending just outside my door. It could have been from regular cleaning, I told myself, but I'd watched the housekeeping carts earlier that day. They stopped halfway down the hall, never past room 817. The rest of the carpet looked untouched, except that one line pressed deep into the fibers, leading right up to 821. When I think back on that trip now, it's not fear that comes up, just a kind of unease. Some things in old buildings don't stop just because people do. Sound carries, patterns repeat, and sometimes for reasons we don't understand. They come back at the same hour, in the same place, doing the same small, familiar thing. I can still picture that empty hallway, the dim light on the carpet, and that quiet, invisible rhythm that kept working long after everyone else had gone home. I was in San Diego for a tech conference that ran from Thursday through Sunday. The company I worked for booked me into the Omni Hotel downtown, right across from Petco Park. It was one of those clean, corporate-style places, all glass, chrome, and light gray furniture. My room was on the 8th floor facing the ballpark. The big windows let in the afternoon sun, and I remember thinking it felt good to finally be in a decent hotel, after the chaos of travel. The first night was normal. I dropped my bags, took a shower, and ordered a burger from room service. Everything looked spotless, the kind of sterile neatness you expect from a hotel that hosts business travelers. The bed was crisp, the air smelled faintly like lemon cleaner, and the bathroom had one of those sliding wooden doors that stayed slightly open unless you latched it. I usually left it open. I don't like closed doors when I'm alone in a hotel room. The next morning, I left early for the conference. I remember checking the bathroom once before leaving, just to make sure I didn't forget anything. The door was open like always. When I came back late that afternoon, I dropped my badge on the table and noticed the bathroom door was shut. Not latched, but fully closed. I didn't think much of it. Maybe housekeeping had shut it when they cleaned. But when I went inside, the towels looked exactly as I'd left them. One on the rack, one hanging on the shower handle from the night before. Nothing seemed out of place, but I still had this small, uneasy feeling. That night, I left the bathroom door open again before going to bed. The following morning, I noticed it again, closed. Same thing. The rest of the room was untouched. My bag and laptop were exactly where I left them. The bed made perfectly, the TV remote still angled on the nightstand. But that door, always closed. By the third day, it had started to bother me more than it should have. There's something strange about realizing a small pattern you didn't invite is repeating itself. It wasn't enough to complain about, but it was enough to make me uncomfortable. I didn't tell anyone at the conference because it sounded ridiculous. The bathroom door in my hotel keeps closing by itself. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was in there. That morning, before heading out, I decided to test it. I propped my phone on the dresser, facing the bathroom. I lined it up carefully so the entire doorway was visible. I checked that the recording angle was right. A full, wide view of the bathroom entrance, the sliding door, and part of the bed. I hit record, then grabbed my backpack and left for the day. I was gone from around 8:30 a.m. until close to 5 p.m. The weather was hot and dry, typical for San Diego. I remember the glass facade of the convention center reflecting sunlight so bright, it felt like standing in front of a mirror. I sat through several talks, grabbed lunch with a few co-workers, and tried not to think about the camera. But in the back of my head, I couldn't stop picturing that quiet hotel room sitting empty. When I came back that evening, the first thing I noticed when I unlocked the door was, again, the bathroom door was closed. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at it for a few seconds. The air felt still heavy. My phone was still sitting exactly where I'd left it, propped up against a small water bottle on the dresser. I picked it up, stopped the recording, and sat down on the bed. The video ran for about 8 hours. Most of it was uneventful, just a static shot of an empty room with shifting daylight. But around the 40-minute mark, the door began to move, slowly. Not pushed by air conditioning, not nudged slightly. It slid open, smooth and deliberate. I leaned closer to the screen, squinting. A man stepped out. He wore a gray housekeeping uniform, short sleeves, the kind with a collar and front buttons. No name tag. He wasn't holding any cleaning supplies. He looked to be in his 40s with short, dark hair, clean shaven. He walked out of the bathroom slowly, glancing around the room like he was making sure nobody was there. He didn't look nervous, more like he was checking something. He stood in the middle of the room for nearly a minute. Then he walked to the mini fridge, opened it, and took out one of the small bottled waters. He twisted the cap, drank half, and looked toward the camera for a second. Not directly into it, but close enough that I could see the side of his face. Then he went back into the bathroom, still holding the bottle. The footage kept running. For 15 minutes, nothing happened. The bathroom door stayed shut. Then it opened again, and he walked out, set the half-empty bottle on the counter near the TV, and quietly left through the main door. I remember feeling my chest tighten as I watched it. I kept thinking I was going to see something worse, like him going through my luggage or lying down on the bed. But he didn't. It was just that strange, deliberate movement. The way he seemed completely comfortable being there. I checked the mini fridge. The bottle he took was gone, and there was a half-empty one sitting on the counter, just like in the video. The seal was broken. I hadn't touched it. I sat on the bed for a long time trying to make sense of it. Maybe it was a new hire who didn't log his rounds. Maybe the staff had a maintenance schedule I didn't know about. But the way he came out of the bathroom, from inside it, didn't make sense. I had left that door open all morning. There was nowhere to hide in there. It was a small space with a walk-in shower, toilet, and sink. No vents big enough for a person. After replaying the footage 3 or 4 times, I decided to go down to the front desk. The woman at the counter looked professional and calm. I told her that someone had entered my room. I didn't show her the video at first, just said that I had proof. She took down my room number and said she'd check with housekeeping. I waited in the lobby for almost 15 minutes while she made some calls. When she came back, she looked puzzled. She said all housekeeping staff on duty that day were accounted for, and none of them wore gray uniforms anymore. She mentioned that the staff had changed uniforms months ago. Now they wore navy blue shirts with embroidered name tags. I asked if there had been anyone from maintenance. She checked again. Nothing. No one was supposed to be in my room. I showed her the video. She leaned in, watching the screen carefully, and I could see her expression shift. Not scared, but unsettled. She said she'd need to show it to the manager. I waited again, sitting in one of the lobby chairs near the window, watching people walk past outside under the streetlights. After maybe half an hour, the manager came over. He had the same polite, composed look, but there was something off in his tone, like he was trying too hard to sound calm. He apologized, said they would investigate immediately, and offered to move me to another room. That night, they moved me up to the 10th floor. Different layout, same view of the ballpark. When I got upstairs, I checked the bathroom door first thing. It was open. I left it that way. The next morning, I woke early and checked. Still open. Nothing moved. No strange signs. I finished the conference, checked out, and flew home. A week later, out of curiosity, I looked up news about that hotel. Nothing about break-ins or security incidents. But in an old discussion forum buried years back, I found a post from someone who stayed at the same hotel. They mentioned a man in a gray housekeeping uniform who had let himself into their room without knocking. Said he just stood there, said nothing, and left after a minute. The post was from 2017. I emailed the hotel once more, attached the footage, and asked if they'd found out who the man was. I never got a reply. I deleted the video after a few weeks. Not because I stopped thinking about it, but because every time I watched it, I noticed small things I hadn't before. The way his eyes moved toward the bed, the slow pause before he went back into the bathroom, the faint sound of running water just before he left. Even now, when I stay in hotels, I always check the bathroom door twice. Once when I arrive, and once when I leave, and I never ever leave it open anymore. I stayed at a small boutique hotel off Queen Street West in Toronto last spring. It was one of those artsy, converted warehouse kinds of places. Exposed brick walls, low lighting, quiet lobby with faint jazz music and the smell of citrus cleaner lingering in the air. I was in town for a short business trip, 2 nights, nothing special. The building had 4 floors, but the hallways were narrow and oddly shaped, like the place had been remodeled several times without much planning. My room was on the 2nd floor, 204, a corner unit near the end of the hall. When I checked in, the front desk clerk handed me a key card and a small printed slip with my room number on it. I was tired from the flight, hadn't eaten since noon, and just wanted to shower and sleep. The elevator creaked all the way up. The 2nd floor hallway smelled faintly like new paint and some kind of floral air freshener. A cleaning cart was parked outside one of the rooms, 206 I remember, and a small radio sat on top playing low pop music. I didn't see anyone around, so I walked past it to my door, unlocked it, and went inside. The room was modern, minimal. Gray walls, one window facing an alley, a single piece of abstract art above the bed. The air was cool, the sheets crisp. I dropped my bag on the chair, plugged in my phone, and sat on the edge of the bed for a minute, feeling the quiet settle. You could hear faint traffic from Queen Street. A streetcar bell in the distance, nothing unusual. I showered, ordered a sandwich from the bar downstairs, and ate it while watching the news on mute. Around 11:30, I turned off the lights, left the bathroom, light dimmed for a bit of glow, and lay down. At some point later, I woke up. My phone said 1:03 a.m., the kind of half-awake where you're not sure what stirred you. For a few seconds, I just listened. The building was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning. Then I heard it, soft footsteps in the hallway outside. Slow, uneven steps. A pause, then a few more. It wasn't cleaning staff. I knew they were done hours ago. I waited, telling myself someone was probably coming back from the bar or a late shift. Then there was a sound that didn't fit. A faint scrape, like paper sliding against carpet. It came from directly under my door. I sat up, the sound stopped. I stayed still for several seconds, heart picking up speed. I switched on the bedside lamp. The room filled with pale yellow light. I stared at the bottom of the door. A small shadow lay beneath it, the edge of something white. I hesitated, then got up slowly, crossed the carpet, and crouched down. It was a folded napkin, the kind they used at the hotel bar downstairs, thick and slightly creased. I slid it toward me and unfolded it. Inside, in shaky handwriting that looked rushed, were 6 words. Don't go to sleep. They have your room wrong. The handwriting wasn't neat. Letters uneven, pressed hard enough that the ink bled slightly. My stomach tightened. I looked at the door again, then pressed my eye to the peephole. The hallway was empty. The cleaning cart that had been near 206 earlier was gone. The air was completely still. I stood there for a long minute, napkin still in my hand, trying to make sense of it. My mind raced through explanations. Prank, mistake, maybe someone drunk got the wrong door. But the tone of the message didn't feel like a prank. It felt deliberate, like a warning. I checked my phone, 1:07 a.m. I thought about calling the front desk, but I didn't want to sound paranoid. I looked at the napkin again. They have your room wrong. That part stuck with me. What did that mean? I picked up my keycard from the table and stared at it. Clearly said 204. The paper slip I'd been given also said 204. I went to the door and checked the number plate. 204. Black letters on brushed metal. I turned on every light in the room and sat in the chair by the window, napkin on the table beside me. I couldn't bring myself to lie down again. I tried watching TV, then scrolling my phone, but I kept glancing at the door. At one point, around 1:40, I thought I heard a faint knock from farther down the hall, maybe 2 or 3 rooms away. But it was hard to tell if it was real or just pipes or the building settling. Eventually, I called the front desk. The night clerk answered, calm and polite. I told him someone might have slid something under my door, asked if there was any chance another guest was confused about their room. He put me on hold for maybe half a minute, came back and said there were no other guests checked into 204 that night. Just me, that made me feel worse somehow. I asked if anyone had access to the hallway, cleaning staff, security, anyone. And he said no, not after midnight. He offered to send someone up to check, but I said no. I didn't want a stranger at my door in the middle of the night. Not after that message. I didn't sleep. I left the lights on, sat up until I saw the gray light of dawn filtering through the window. Around 6:30, I showered again, just to shake the feeling off, and went downstairs when the cafe opened for breakfast. The morning staff was different, younger, cheerful, chatting with guests as they made coffee orders. The lobby smelled like baked bread and citrus. I handed my keycard to the front desk clerk, a woman this time, and asked if they could confirm what room I was in. I told her I thought there might have been some confusion. She typed something into her computer, frowned, and asked for my last name. Then she checked again. After a moment, she looked up and said, "It says here you're in room 206. I blinked at her, then showed her the card holder I'd kept in my wallet. The printed slip inside clearly said 204. She frowned again, said maybe there had been a computer mix-up. She printed a fresh card labeled 206 and apologized for the error. I didn't bother explaining the napkin. I just took the new key and asked if they'd had any issues with room assignments lately. She said no, not that she knew of. Out of curiosity, before heading upstairs, I walked down the second-floor hallway again. Room 206 was directly next to mine. Same layout, same door design. I glanced at 204, my door from last night. It was shut tight, the Do Not Disturb sign hanging from the handle. I felt a strange chill looking at it, even though I knew logically it was probably just a regular guest room. That night I stayed in 206. Everything was normal. No sounds, no notes, no footsteps, but it didn't feel the same. I couldn't shake the thought that I wasn't supposed to be in that other room to begin with. The next morning, when I checked out, I asked again if they could verify the room situation, mostly to satisfy my own curiosity. The manager pulled up my file. According to their system, my reservation had always been for room 206. There was no record of any guest being assigned 204 during my stay. I asked if maybe someone else had checked in late, and he shook his head. The cleaning logs showed 204 as unoccupied the entire week. I left it at that. Later that day, waiting at the airport, I unfolded the napkin again. I'd kept it tucked into my bag without thinking. The ink had smudged slightly, and the edges were crumpled. I stared at the words for a long time. Don't go to sleep. They have your room wrong. I tried to convince myself it was nothing, some weird prank or maybe a confused guest who slipped the note under the wrong door. But part of me kept circling back to that moment in the hallway when I'd looked through the peephole and seen nothing. The silence had felt heavy, like someone had just stepped out of sight. I threw the napkin away before boarding my flight. But that message stuck with me, because no matter how I turned it over in my mind, one thing never made sense. If my record always showed room 206, then who had left a note outside 204, thinking I was the one who shouldn't be there? I stayed at the Marriott Courtyard near Bush Intercontinental Airport because my flight got delayed late into the night, and I didn't feel like dealing with another round of rebooking chaos at the terminal. I remember the lobby being mostly empty when I walked in. The air conditioning was cold enough to sting after the Texas humidity outside. The smell was the usual hotel mix of lemon cleaner and faint coffee from the bar area. It was close to midnight, and the clerk behind the desk looked half asleep, typing something on the screen when I approached. He checked me in without much fuss, slid 2 key cards toward me, and circled my room number on the paper sleeve. I didn't think much of it at the time. Sometimes they give 2 cards automatically. When I got up to the 3rd floor, the hallway was quiet and smelled faintly like chlorine from the pool downstairs. The carpet was that patterned kind hotels use to hide stains, and the lights buzzed faintly overhead. I let myself into the room, 318, and tossed my bag on the bed. The air inside was cool but stale, like it hadn't been used in a while. I flicked on the lamp near the bed, and the yellow light filled the room just enough to show the usual setup. 1 queen bed, a small desk with a padded chair, and the bathroom to the right. The first key card worked fine. The second one, I tried out of curiosity, didn't light up the lock at all. I figured it was just an extra or maybe misprogrammed, so I threw it in my wallet and forgot about it. After a quick shower, I pulled the curtains shut tight. The airport lights from outside bled through the edges, casting a faint orange line on the floor. I climbed into bed, watched TV for maybe half an hour, and drifted off sometime around 12:30. I woke up to a sound that didn't fit the room. A soft mechanical click, the sound of a key card unlocking a door. My eyes opened instantly, heart already thumping. For a second I thought maybe I'd dreamed it, but then the handle turned. The door pushed open about halfway, letting in a thin sliver of light from the hallway. It stayed there, open for maybe 2 or 3 seconds. Then it closed again, not slammed, just quietly pulled shut, the latch clicking back into place. I lay there frozen, staring at the faint glow under the door. The silence that followed was heavier than before. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner again, faintly, and the muted sound of an elevator bell somewhere down the hall. I waited several minutes before moving, Finally, I got out of bed, walked to the door, and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I didn't hear any footsteps retreating or the elevator door opening. It was like whoever had opened my door had just disappeared. After standing there for what felt like forever, I finally locked the door again, this time flipping the metal latch at the top. I sat back on the edge of the bed and tried to think rationally. Maybe someone at the front desk mixed up the rooms and gave another guest a working card for mine. It happens, but the sound I heard wasn't a knock or a jiggle. It was the solid beep of a card being accepted. I called the front desk from the phone by the bed. My voice sounded strange when I spoke, tight and uneven. I explained what happened, that someone had just tried to enter my room. The clerk checked something on his end, then said there were no other active key cards for my room besides mine. He said the system showed no entries since my check-in. That didn't help. If the door had really opened, and I knew it had, then someone had access another way. I barely slept the rest of the night. Every sound made me jolt awake. Around 3 in the morning, I turned on the lamp and just sat there until dawn. When the first light came through the curtains, I packed my bag and went down early. I told myself I'd just switch hotels for the second night. The woman at the front desk that morning was different. Middle-aged, well-dressed, with the kind of polite smile people in customer service wear even when they're not really smiling. I explained the whole thing. How someone opened my door. How the night clerk said no other keys existed. She looked concerned but professional, apologized, and said she'd have maintenance check the lock. I reached into my wallet and pulled out the extra key card the clerk had given me by mistake. I told her maybe it was related somehow. She took it, scanned it with the reader on the counter, and then frowned. She tried again, then looked at the screen more closely. "This isn't one of ours," she said, but her tone wasn't the kind of casual confusion you expect. She looked at the card again, flipping it over. The front had the Marriott Courtyard logo printed slightly differently. The old design, I realized. The corners were more rounded, the font heavier. I hadn't noticed it before. She said something about the encoding format being an older version they hadn't used in years. I asked how that was possible if the card still worked. She didn't really answer. Just said it shouldn't have worked. That all the locks were updated about 5 years ago. I checked out right after that. But on my way out, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone in that building still had one of those old cards. Maybe a staff member who'd worked there before the update. Maybe someone who never turned theirs in. If the system had changed but not every door got replaced, maybe some still recognized the old coding. I kept thinking about that. How sometimes businesses upgrade in phases, not all at once. How an older lock might still respond to a certain kind of magnetic stripe. Back in my car, I looked at the hotel from the parking lot. The windows all looked the same, square, dark, reflective. But I knew which one was mine from the curtain being pulled unevenly. I kept picturing that door opening just a few inches. Someone standing there in silence. The thought that whoever it was didn't bother to knock, didn't say anything, didn't run away, just opened the door and watched. That bothered me more than anything else. On the drive home later that day, I kept replaying the sound in my head, that soft mechanical click, the pause, the quiet way the door closed again. I checked the hotel's website later out of curiosity. The courtyard near Bush Intercontinental had changed hands a few years ago. Apparently around the same time the manager said the lock system was upgraded. Before that, it had been another brand entirely, part of a different chain. If someone had kept one of those older MasterCards, one that still had residual access to certain rooms, it could explain everything. Still, I couldn't stop wondering why that person chose mine. There were hundreds of rooms. Why 318? Was it random, or did they know it was occupied? I never found out, and I never heard anything from the hotel again. I sent an email a week later, just asking if they'd figured out what happened. No response. I checked my bank statement. No extra charges, nothing out of place. Sometimes when I stay in hotels now, I pay extra attention to the door locks. I tug on the handle after it clicks, check the latch twice. Listen for that soft mechanical sound when someone else's card is accepted. I even cover the little peephole with a piece of tissue at night. It's strange. You go to places like that assuming safety because of the brand name, the lighting, the front desk, the automatic doors. But everything there runs on layers of systems. Old technology, replaced locks, half-updated security. All it takes is one leftover card that never got deactivated, one person who knows how to use it, and the door opens quietly in the middle of the night while you're asleep, thinking you're alone. I was driving east on I-40 late one night, somewhere in New Mexico. The kind of stretch where the highway feels endless, and the radio signal fades to static between towns. My eyes were burning from hours on the road. I'd been up since dawn, trying to make it to Amarillo, but exhaustion was creeping in, and I knew I couldn't keep driving safely. Around midnight, I saw a flickering neon sign off the exit near Tucumcari. Desert View Motel, vacancy. The sign buzzed faintly, letters half burned out. I figured it would do for a few hours of sleep. The road leading to it was cracked and empty, lined with old gas stations and boarded-up diners from when Route 66 still mattered. The motel sat at the edge of town, one long strip of rooms with peeling turquoise paint and rusty air conditioners hanging out of each window. The office light was still on. I parked under a crooked lamppost that flickered every few seconds, casting everything in a sick yellow pulse. Inside the office was a man in his 60s, thin, hair slicked back, wearing a stained polo shirt. He looked up from a small TV on the counter and said they only took cash. I didn't care. $20 got me room 9. He handed me a brass key attached to a faded plastic tag. I signed my name in a paper logbook and noticed that the last guest had checked in 2 days earlier. The air outside smelled faintly of dust and diesel. I unlocked the door, flicked the switch, and a dim yellow bulb buzzed to life. The room was about what I expected. A single bed with a floral bedspread that looked older than me, a nightstand with a chipped lamp, a tube TV that didn't seem to work, and a small bathroom with a rust-stained sink. The carpet was stiff and uneven under my shoes. The air smelled like mildew, cigarettes, and something else. Maybe cleaning solution that didn't quite do its job. I locked the door, latched the chain, and pushed a chair under the handle for good measure. Habit from too many cheap motels. I set my bag on the chair, kicked off my shoes, and sat on the edge of the bed. The sheets were cold, slightly damp. The air conditioner rattled every few seconds, blowing air that smelled faintly like mold. I lay back, staring at the ceiling. The paint above me was cracked into spiderweb patterns, the kind that come from years of water damage. I tried to fall asleep, listening to the hum of the neon sign outside, the occasional rumble of a truck passing on the highway. Sometime after 1, I drifted off. What woke me wasn't a sound at first, but light. Headlights sweeping across the thin curtains, bright white that cut through the room for a few seconds, then disappeared. A car pulling into the lot. I didn't think much of it. People came and went at odd hours on the road. But then came the sound of an engine shutting off, a car door opening, then closing softly. Silence for a moment, then slow, heavy footsteps on the concrete walkway outside, the kind of slow, uneven pace of someone dragging their shoes. I waited, half awake, thinking it was another guest heading to their room. But the footsteps stopped directly in front of mine. I froze. Nothing for a few seconds. Then the doorknob jiggled, once, then again harder. The metal clinked softly under the chain. I sat up, heart pounding. The chair I'd wedged under the knob shifted slightly from the pressure. Whoever was out there paused. Then the knob turned again, forceful this time, shaking the door. I managed to find my voice and shouted that they had the wrong room. My voice cracked halfway through. The jiggling stopped immediately. For several seconds there was complete silence. I could hear only the distant hum of the highway. Then I heard slow breathing, faint but real, just on the other side of the thin wooden door. I got out of bed as quietly as I could and stepped toward the window. The curtain was thin, barely covering the glass. I moved it just enough to look through the narrow gap. There was a man standing there. He was directly in front of my door, a few feet away, facing it head-on. He wasn't moving, not even shifting his weight. The parking lot light behind him threw his shape into silhouette. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing what looked like a dark jacket and jeans. His hands hung loosely at his sides. I stood there watching him, holding my breath. After about a minute, he turned his head slowly toward the next door, room 10. Then he walked that way, dragging his shoes again, and tried that doorknob. I backed away from the window. My mind was racing. I thought about calling the office, but I didn't see a phone in the room. My cell was on the nightstand, and of course there was no signal. I thought about leaving, but the idea of opening that door while he was out there was worse than staying put. For the next few minutes, I listened to the faint rattle of the next door's handle. Then the sound stopped. No footsteps, nothing. I waited. 5 minutes, 10, still nothing. I finally lay back down, shoes still on, staring at the ceiling again, my pulse hammering in my ears. Every creak of the air conditioner made me flinch. Eventually, sometime near dawn, I must have drifted off. When I woke again, light was seeping through the curtains. My watch said 8:12 a.m. The air felt stale and heavy. I packed up fast, didn't even shower. When I stepped outside, the parking lot was empty except for my car and an old pickup truck near the far end. The office door was open. The same guy behind the counter watching TV. I turned in my key and mentioned that someone had been outside my room last night trying doors. He barely looked up and said it was probably just a drunk. Happens sometimes. Then he gave a little shrug like it wasn't worth worrying about. I went to load my bag into the car, but as I passed room 10, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The door frame was splintered around the latch, wood cracked inward, like it had been forced open. A strip of yellow police tape hung loose from the top corner, fluttering slightly in the breeze. Another piece was stuck to the ground near the curb, half torn and dirty. When I went back to the office to ask about it, the guy said it was old, from last week, some couple that had been attacked and robbed. "Didn't you hear about it?" he said. I hadn't. I walked back to my car slowly, that faint smell of diesel still in the air. I glanced down the line of doors, 12 in total, all painted the same faded blue, all looking exactly alike. Only room 10's lock looked newer, freshly replaced. Before I started the engine, I looked at the door of my own room one more time. The knob was scratched, the paint around it slightly chipped from last night's jiggling. I sat there for a while, letting the engine idle, watching the wind stir the dust across the lot. The thought that I might have been only one door away from whatever had happened to that couple made my hands shake on the steering wheel. Maybe it was just a drunk, maybe it wasn't. Either way, the sound of that slow, dragging step was something I knew I'd never forget. When I finally pulled onto the highway, the neon sign was still buzzing faintly behind me, one letter flickering out completely as I glanced in the rearview mirror. The road stretched empty ahead, the desert flat and colorless under the morning sun. For a long time I kept checking my mirrors, expecting to see headlights appear behind me, but the highway stayed quiet. I didn't stop again until I was 200 miles away. Even then, when I got a new motel room later that night, the first thing I did after locking the door was check the handle 3 times and shove a chair beneath it. It didn't feel paranoid anymore. It felt necessary. Every time I hear that metallic click of a doorknob, I still think about that sound in Tucumcari. The heavy drag of shoes on concrete, the silence that followed. The fact that someone tried room 10 first last week and room 9 last night. I stayed at the Hilton Garden Inn near Back Bay Station for 2 nights on a short work trip. It was late February, cold, with a steady wind that made every metal sign in the parking lot rattle. The hotel was decent, business travelers, families, the usual kind of place where everything looks slightly too clean and smells faintly of carpet cleaner and coffee. I checked in late, around 10:30 p.m., after a long day of flights and delays. My room was on the 8th floor, number 807. When I walked in, it looked normal enough. Standard layout, 2 queen beds, heavy curtains, desk by the window, TV opposite the bed, that constant hum from the heating unit. The only thing I didn't like was the connecting door to the next room. It was on the wall near the second bed, one of those double doors with a lock on both sides. I always hate those. Even when they're locked, it feels like someone could just walk through if they wanted to. Still, I shrugged it off, set my bag down, and turned on the lamp near the desk. The lock on my side looked fine. Solid metal latch turned fully horizontal. I unpacked a little, plugged my phone in on the nightstand, and let the TV run for background noise while I brushed my teeth. Outside the window, I could see the faint glow of the Back Bay train platforms and the red taillights of cars moving along the main road below. I remember thinking how quiet the room was for being right next to a busy station. Around 11:30, I turned off the TV, left the desk light on low, and got into bed. I must have fallen asleep fast because the next thing I remember was waking up to a sound. At first, I couldn't tell what it was. It wasn't loud, just a faint, steady noise coming from the direction of the connecting door. I stayed still for a moment, half awake, listening. It sounded like whispering. Two voices, very low, like someone having a quiet conversation right on the other side of the wall. My first thought was that someone had checked into the next room late. I glanced at the clock, 12:04 a.m. I could only make out small fragments of sound, not full words, just the rise and fall of tone. It would stop for a few seconds, then start again. Uneven, almost hesitant. I figured maybe they were drunk, maybe talking close to the door for some reason. I tried to ignore it, but it kept going. This soft, broken whispering that didn't sound like a normal conversation. Every few seconds it paused mid-sentence, then started again with a slightly different tone, like someone testing how quiet they could speak before being heard. After about 10 minutes, I sat up. The whispers stopped for a few seconds, then started again, slower this time. I felt my pulse rise a little. The connecting door was only a few feet away from the bed, and I could see the faint outline of its edges in the dim light. I listened closer and realized it wasn't quite the same as a TV. There was no background, sound, no music or laughter. Just voices, low, breathy, right at that thin section of wall. Then I heard it. A light tapping sound on the door. Just 3 slow taps. I froze, sitting upright in bed. It was too deliberate to be random. I stared at the door, trying to process whether it could be pipes or maybe the building settling. But then it happened again, slower this time, like someone using a single finger to tap on the door from the other side. I felt a small rush of anger and fear mixed together. I spoke out loud, telling them to keep it down. The whispering stopped instantly. Dead quiet. That silence felt heavier than the noise before. I waited, watching the door, half expecting a voice or another sound. Instead, there was a faint metallic noise, the handle on my side turning just slightly. I heard the click of metal shifting in the latch. That was enough. I jumped out of bed and shoved the desk chair under the handle, angling it so the back pressed tightly against it. My hands were shaking as I checked the main door to the hallway. The deadbolt was locked, the latch engaged. I stood there for a moment, listening hard. Nothing, just that low hum of the heater. I grabbed my phone and called the front desk. My voice sounded strange, tight. I asked if someone had been checked into the room next to mine, 809. The woman said she'd check and put me on hold for a minute. I stood there barefoot on the carpet, staring at that connecting door, waiting to hear something again. She came back and said the room had been vacant for 3 days. No guests, no reservations until the weekend. I didn't say much after that. Just asked if someone could come up because I thought I heard something through the door. She said she'd send maintenance to take a look. I waited in the hallway, barefoot, until an older guy in a polo shirt came up with a master key. He checked 809 first, unlocked it, went in with a flashlight, then came back out and said it was empty, completely dark, no signs anyone had been there. He looked over at the connecting door from that side and said it was locked solid. I told him what I heard, He shrugged, said maybe the ventilation was carrying sound from another floor, maybe a maintenance shaft. I knew that wasn't it, but I didn't argue. He checked the latch from my side, wiggled it a little, said it seemed fine. Then he left. I didn't sleep much after that. Every small noise made me sit up. At one point, around 3 a.m., I thought. I heard a faint scuffing sound again, but it could have been the heater. When daylight came through the curtains, I finally relaxed enough to drift off for maybe an hour. The next morning, I went downstairs for breakfast. The front desk manager, different person this time, asked if I'd been the one who called last night about the noise. I said yes, and she told me maintenance had checked the latch again that morning. Apparently, when they looked closely, the screws around the latch plate on the connecting door were stripped, and the latch itself had been reattached from the inside at some point. She said it looked like someone had forced it open long ago and just patched it back up. She mentioned they'd put in a request to replace the entire door. I just nodded. She said the room next door was still locked and empty, but they were going to double-check the locks and security cameras for the hallway. I went back upstairs to grab my things. In the daylight, the room looked completely normal again. The connecting door sat there quietly, sunlight cutting a thin, bright line across its base. I bent down and looked at it more closely. Around the edge of the frame, the paint was slightly uneven, like it had been repainted a few times. I noticed small scratches on the lower part of the metal plate, faint but visible if you looked closely. I packed my bag, unplugged my charger, and took one last look before leaving. There was nothing strange now. No sound, no feeling that someone was standing on the other side. Just that quiet hotel stillness that feels too perfect in the morning. But I couldn't shake the thought of how clear that whispering had been, and how fast it had stopped when I spoke. When I checked out, the manager said again they'd investigate. I didn't ask for details. I just nodded and left. Outside, the cold air hit my face and the city noises felt louder, more grounded. I walked toward Back Bay Station with my bag over my shoulder, thinking about how thin those connecting doors really are. How one piece of metal and a few screws are all that separate you from whoever or whatever might be in the room next to yours. I never found out what caused those sounds. Maybe someone had broken in before, maybe someone still had a key, or maybe the building just made noises that coincidentally mimicked voices. But I know what I heard. Two people whispering, close, enough that I could almost feel their breath through that thin strip of painted wood. And I know how it felt when the handle on my side moved, slow and careful, like someone testing if they could come through. When I think about that night now, what stays with me isn't fear exactly. It's that sudden awareness of how fragile privacy really is in places like that. How you can lock every door and still never be completely alone. I was in Reno for a quick 2-day business trip, staying at the Sands Regency downtown. The kind of mid-tier casino hotel that used to be flashy in the 80s, but now mostly draws budget travelers, retirees, and a few stragglers from the convention center. It was late October, cold wind off the desert, sky overcast. I'd flown in that afternoon, rented a car, checked in around 4 p.m., room 1134, 11th floor, North Tower. The hallway smelled faintly of carpet cleaner, and cigarette smoke baked into the walls from decades ago. My room was typical. Queen bed, desk, old beige curtains, small flat screen bolted to the wall, and that hum from the air conditioner that never quite turned off. After unpacking, I took a shower, changed clothes, and went downstairs for dinner. I ate at the small steakhouse attached to the casino floor, ordered a ribeye that came out overcooked but edible. The casino was half full. Older couples at the slots, a few lonely men at the bar watching a football game on the TV above the bottles. The lighting was dim, yellowish, the kind that makes time feel slower. Around 8:45 p.m., I finished my meal and decided to go back to my room to grab my laptop charger. before heading down to the small business center they had near the lobby. The elevator ride up was slow, and the air felt thick, heavy with that mix of perfume, cleaning solution and smoke residue. The carpeted hallway was quiet except for a faint hum from the vending machine at the far end. I slid my keycard into the reader, waiting for the green light. Nothing. Tried again. Still nothing. No beep, no light, no click. I wiped the card on my sleeve, thinking maybe it was dirty, and tried again. Dead. The lock didn't even blink. I stood there for a second, trying to decide if it was me or the lock. Tried the handle a few more times, nothing. I was tired and a little irritated. I went back down to the lobby. The front desk was mostly empty except for a single employee behind the counter. He looked up from his computer as I explained the problem. He said the battery in the lock probably died, and that maintenance could open it manually. He handed me a new key card and said someone would meet me upstairs to let me in. I went back up, expecting to see a maintenance guy waiting. But when I turned down my hallway, I saw right away that my door was open. Not wide, just cracked open about 6 inches. A thin strip of darkness inside. The number 1134 was lit by the soft yellow wall sconce above it. For a second, I figured maintenance must have just finished unlocking it and gone back down. But something about it made me stop. I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, it was dark. The curtains drawn tight, the bedside lamps off. The air felt still, heavier than before. The first thing I noticed was my laptop bag. Before I went to dinner, I'd left it neatly on the desk, zipped up with my notes stacked beside it. Now it was sitting on the bed, unzipped. The papers were still inside, but slightly crumpled, like someone had opened it and looked through. Next to the bag on the nightstand was a half-full can of Diet Coke. I hadn't opened one. I don't drink Diet Coke. I froze. My first thought was that maybe housekeeping had come in by mistake. But it didn't make sense that they'd open my bag or leave a drink behind. And it was too late for them to be cleaning rooms. It was after 9. I stood there in the doorway for a good 10 seconds, just listening. No sound. No footsteps, no water running, no voices. My heart was pounding hard. I backed out slowly, not even bothering to close the door, and went straight back to the elevator. The ride down felt longer than before, and when the doors opened to the lobby, I walked fast to the front desk. I told the same employee what I saw. He looked confused, said no one from maintenance had gone up yet. He picked up the phone, called security. Within a minute, 2 uniformed guards showed up. They asked me to wait in the lobby while they went to check. I sat in one of the armchairs near the slot machines, trying to calm myself down. I kept thinking maybe I'd misremembered where I'd left the bag. Maybe I had opened a soda earlier and forgot. But the more I tried to rationalize it, the less sense it made. I remembered clearly leaving my bag zipped and sitting upright on the desk. I hadn't even taken a drink upstairs that night. After maybe 15 minutes, one of the guards came back. He said they'd checked the room and everything seemed normal. No one inside, nothing broken. But they'd pull the hallway footage to see if anyone had gone in while I was downstairs. They asked if I wanted to move rooms. I said yes. They moved me down to the 6th floor, room 614. Smaller, older carpet, but at that point I didn't care. They gave me a voucher for breakfast and said they'd let me know if anything showed up on the cameras. I lay awake for most of the night, watching TV with the volume low. Every sound in the hallway made me tense. Around midnight, I heard a faint knock somewhere down the corridor just once, and my chest tightened until it stopped. I didn't sleep more than an hour. In the morning, I went downstairs to check out. The front desk employee said they'd reviewed the footage from the 11th floor. My door never opened after I left. The hallway camera showed me walking away toward the elevator. Then nothing until security went up later. No one else appeared on that floor in that time frame. No one. They comped the night, apologized again. I nodded, thanked them, and just wanted to leave. I grabbed a coffee from the cafe downstairs and walked out to the rental car in the cold morning air. I drove to my meeting, barely able to focus. Every time I thought about the open door, my stomach tightened. Later that day, before heading to the airport, I stopped back at the hotel to grab my receipt. Housekeeping was working on my old floor. and I rode up with one of them in the elevator. When the doors opened on 11, it looked the same. Faded carpet, that humming vending machine at the end. I mentioned casually that I'd been in 1134 the night before. The woman cleaning the room next to it said something that froze me in place. She said they'd found a spare room key tucked under the mattress that morning. I didn't say anything. I just stood there while she kept talking about how people sometimes forget to turn in their extra keys. But I knew it wasn't mine. I only ever had one, the one they gave me at check-in. On the drive to the airport, I kept thinking about how precise everything was. The bag moved, the soda opened, the door left cracked, the deadlock that conveniently failed only while I was away. Someone had been inside that room. Someone who either had a key or knew how to make one, and for reasons I'll never know, they didn't take anything, didn't make a sound, didn't show up on camera. I don't stay in casino hotels anymore. Whenever I travel now, I double latch every door, wedge a chair under the handle, keep my suitcase right beside me. Sometimes late at night in unfamiliar rooms, I think about that spare key under the mattress, and wonder if whoever had it was already inside, waiting for another chance to use it. My flight out of Denver got canceled because of a mechanical issue, and by the time the airline gave out hotel vouchers, it was close to 11 p.m. I was exhausted, hungry and irritated like everyone else standing in that line. They gave me a voucher for the Holiday Inn Express on Tower Road, just a few miles from the airport. It was a standard chain hotel, nothing fancy, just a place to crash before trying again in the morning. By the time the shuttle dropped me off, it was almost 11:30. The lobby lights were dim, that typical yellow glow most budget hotels have at night. There was a faint smell of burnt coffee and cleaning chemicals, like the pot in the lobby had been sitting too long. The place seemed quiet. A muted television behind the counter played a weather report. The night manager was an older guy, maybe mid-60s. He wore glasses and moved with a slight limp, dragging his left foot a little as he stepped up to the counter. He seemed overly friendly for the hour, asking if my flight was canceled, where I was headed, if I'd stayed there before. His voice was calm but just a little too rehearsed, like someone trying to fill silence that didn't need to be filled. When he handed me the key card, he smiled and said, "Room 212, corner 1, you'll like it. Quiet floor tonight." I thanked him, took the elevator, and made my way down the hall. The second floor felt empty. The hallway was lined with patterned carpet that had a faint chemical smell, probably from carpet cleaner. The only sound was the hum of the air system, and the occasional pop from the walls as the building cooled for the night. Room 212 was at the far end of the corridor. I noticed right away the door didn't close properly unless I slammed it. The latch didn't quite catch the first time, so I pushed it hard until I heard it click. Inside, the room looked clean enough. Standard hotel setup, 2 double beds, beige walls, small desk, television, mini fridge, and a heavy blackout curtain over the window. There was nothing unusual about it. I kicked off my shoes, dropped my bag, and turned on the bathroom light. The fluorescent buzz filled the room as I brushed my teeth and scrolled through my phone. I remember thinking how quiet it was. No voices, no TV sounds from other rooms, no footsteps in the hallway, just the hum of the air conditioning and the faint whistle of wind outside. I had just leaned over the sink when I heard the sound, a short electronic beep, like the one hotel door locks make when someone swipes a key card. Then a soft click. The door creaked open about an inch. For a second, I didn't even move. The toothbrush was still in my mouth, my heart suddenly pounding. I turned my head slowly toward the door. It had opened just enough to see the gap of light from the hallway spilling in. I froze there, staring, waiting for something to happen. But nothing did. After what felt like a full minute, I forced myself to speak, trying to sound calm, but my voice came out tight and shaky. I said that the room was occupied. There was no response. Just the faint sound of the latch sliding as the door slowly eased shut again. I stood there, listening. No footsteps, no sounds of anyone walking away, just silence. I waited a long time before I moved. I finally walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The hallway was empty. I checked the lock, turned the deadbolt, and slid the security latch over. My hands were shaking slightly. I picked up the phone and called the front desk. When the line connected, I told them what happened, that someone had tried to open my door. The man who answered didn't sound surprised. His tone was almost casual, which bothered me more than anything. He said it was probably him, that sometimes he checked to make sure guests were settled in. It didn't make sense, but I didn't argue. I just said okay, hung up, and sat on the edge of the bed for a while, staring at the door. I didn't sleep much that night. Every sound made me tense. The hum of the air conditioner, a pipe knocking somewhere, the occasional distant thump of another door closing. All of it kept me on edge. Around 2 in the morning, I turned on the TV just for background noise, some comfort in the empty silence. At one point, I thought I heard something faint, like movement out in the hallway. Soft, slow footsteps that paused outside my door. I muted the TV and listened. It stopped. I told myself it was nothing, maybe another guest. But it didn't sound like someone just walking by. It sounded like someone standing still, listening. Eventually, sometime after 3, I dozed off. I woke up early just after 6. Light was slipping through the edges of the blackout curtain. My first thought was to leave as soon as possible. I showered quickly, packed my things, and checked the door again before leaving. It was still locked, but when I looked closer, I noticed faint scuff marks on the area around the handle, like someone had pressed or pushed against it. It could have been old wear, but it looked fresh. When I got to the lobby, a different person was at the front desk. Younger guy, maybe in his 20s, in a clean uniform shirt. The air smelled of fresh coffee again. I mentioned what had happened the night before. Said the older man told me he was checking on guests. The younger guy looked confused. He said no one fitting that description worked there anymore. The last older manager they had quit a few weeks back. I stood there for a second, processing that. He said it so plainly, like it wasn't anything unusual. I didn't push it. I just nodded, handed over my key card, and left. Outside, the morning air was cold and still. A thin mist hovered near the ground, and I could see the traffic already starting to build toward the airport. I walked to the shuttle stop, still thinking about the door, about that sound of the key card beeping, about how the man at the desk hadn't seemed even remotely surprised. The ride to the airport was quiet. Everyone else looked half asleep, faces blank in the dim shuttle light. I couldn't stop picturing that thin line of light from the hallway spilling into the room, the slow creak of the door. When I got to my gate later, I checked my phone and looked up the hotel's number again. I called, just to see if maybe the older man was working after all. A woman answered, said she was the daytime manager. I told her briefly that I'd stayed there the night before and wanted to confirm who'd been on duty. She said only the younger man had worked the overnight shift. I didn't say anything else. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the wall for a while. I kept thinking about how the door hadn't latched right when I arrived, how I'd had to slam it, how the lock beeped and the door opened so smoothly, like whoever it was had a working keycard. There was nothing supernatural about any of it, just the thought that someone who shouldn't have had access did. Maybe an ex-employee with a card they never turned in. Maybe someone who knew the system. Whoever it was, they were quiet enough to open that door just an inch, to stand there in the dark and listen, to close it again without making a sound. That's what bothered me most, the silence, not knowing how long they might have stood there, just waiting, before deciding to walk away. I've stayed in dozens of hotels since then, but every single time before I even unpack, I slam the door twice, check the latch 3 times, and sit for a few seconds listening, just to make sure